Have you ever seen those old-fashioned noir movies? Like the kind that's got a hard-boiled detective who's getting too old for this crap. And then he investigates a murder, and that just leads him into a deeper web of scandal and death. You ever seen one of those movies and think to yourself, this is fine and all, but where's my sexy animated waifu? No, just, man, where are all the cartoons? Hi, my name is Kyrie, and this is Flights of Fantasy, the show where we look at different science fiction and fantasy movies and ask, what do they mean? There are some movies that walk so that others can fly. If you've ever enjoyed Space Jam, you better pull up your pants, because today's movie flew so that way Space Jam could take a leisurely stroll and then trip over its own shoelaces. Confusing metaphors aside, today we're going to be going over 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Take a drink every time I tell you that I love this movie. If you've never seen it before, strap in. This is a pretty good time. Who Framed Roger Rabbit starts out with a nostalgic cartoon featuring a baby and a rabbit and all of their physical comedy hijinks that they get up to. But then the director calls cut.
Cut! All right, that's it, cut!
Just like the PS3 masterpiece LA Noire, this movie takes place in 1947 Los Angeles. Except this is a world where humans and cartoons coexist. To an extent anyway, but more on that later. There are two things that I really like about this scene. One, Baby Ermin being voiced by a middle-aged man.
What the hell is wrong with that take?
And two, the mom that takes place in a lot of kind of cartoons of this era, just being this guy on stilts. Roger Rabbit is falling short and begging our director for another chance when our main protagonist steps onto the scene. His name is Eddie Valiant. He's an alcoholic, hard-boiled detective who's come to the studio to meet with the head honcho of Maroon Cartoons himself, Mr. Maroon. There have been rumors that Roger's wife might be stepping out on him, so Maroon hires Eddie to get photographic proof. Eddie Valiant is played by Bob Hoskins, who we'll see again when I cover the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is the only Mario Brothers movie as far as I'm concerned. Eddie goes off to his favorite local watering hole, who is bartended by Dolores, something of a on-again, off-again fling for him. There's talk about this company, Cloverfield, that's buying out all the public transportation, and then Eddie gets really aggressive with a guy who makes a joke about him working with cartoons.
Get this straight, meatball. I don't work for toons.
As Eddie walks away, Dolores tells this poor dumbfounded man what Eddie's deal is. His brother was killed by a toon. Like and subscribe if you would not kill Eddie's brother. That night, Eddie goes to a club where Jessica Rabbit, Roger's wife, is supposed to be singing. Quick pause. Something that I love about this movie is the references to different cartoons that are owned by different companies. For example, in this bar scene, Daffy Duck and Donald Duck, fun fact, this is the only time they've ever appeared on screen in the same movie at the same time.
Does anybody understand what this duck is
You know, on account of Disney owning Donald Duck and Warner Brothers owning Daffy Duck. I've heard rumors that it was part of the contract that they had to be on screen at the same, for the same amount of time with the same amount of lines. And this happens later on with Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse. Characters of Disney and Warner Brothers, to my knowledge, have never shared the screen in a movie before until this movie. And to my knowledge, they have not shared the screen since. I can only imagine the sheer amount of licensing hell that went into making this movie. Not only that, but those poor animators. For every single character, pre-existing character that's in this movie, they had to clear it with Warner Brothers or Disney respectively and their animators in order for them to animate it. They had to make sure that they were getting the characters correct and that the companies were signing off on it. For every pre-existing character. Eddie isn't too amused with all this tomfoolery though, and he's definitely not very happy with the gags that Marvin Acme is playing on him.
Put it there, pal. The hand buzzer.
Marvin Acme is the guy who owns the Acme Corporation, as well as Toontown, but more on that later. But Acme isn't just here to mess with Eddie. He's here because Jessica is about to sing, and he never misses a night where Jessica is singing. And if we're being honest, who can blame him?
Give me some money too.
Fun fact, the actors for this didn't know what the character of Jessica was going to look like. So after seeing the final product, I think it was Bob Atkins that was like, oh my God, the lady that I had in my head was like way less sexy than this god. Eddie gets kicked out of the club for peeping, but that doesn't stop him from getting the goods. Compromising pictures of Marvin Acme and Jessica, playing patty cake. No, but literally.
Patty cake, patty cake, patty cake, patty cake, patty cake, patty cake.
You gotta be kidding me.
Roger Rabbit doesn't take this very well. Also, he can't hold his liquor. So every time a toon interacts with a real-life object, whether it's Roger with a hanky in this scene or Betty Boop, closing Eddie's jaw in the last scene, just remember, they had to use practical effects to achieve this look. The actors are acting with co-stars they can't see. They have to react with perfect timing in order to coordinate with all of the crew members that are making the set move, and they have to react convincingly and in not a too big of a way, so that way there's enough room to draw the cartoon. God, I love this movie. The night ends with Roger Rabbit sobbing by himself and looking over pictures of him and Jessica. Eddie Valiant, when he gets home, he also reminisces on happier days. Days with Dolores, days with his brother, who was his co-detective. The two of them worked on a lot of cases that helped toons, and we see that Eddie used to be quite the jokester. Heck, he and his brother were raised with a clown father. But the death of Teddy has also meant the death of Eddie's sense of humor and his joy. The next morning, Eddie gets a rude awakening by an old lieutenant friend. Marvin Acme was murdered last night. And they're looking for Roger for it. Acme was whacked by an anvil to the head, just like they would in the cartoons. Eddie has an uncomfortable interaction with Judge Doom, who along with his gangster weasel patrol are on a crusade to hunt Roger down. Judge Doom also demonstrates his novel way of killing toons. Baby Herman is waiting outside of Eddie's office by the time he gets back. The baby insists that Roger couldn't have killed Acme. He also says that contrary to newspaper reporting, Acme had a will, and that will was going to give Toontown back to the Toons. Eddie is extremely skeptical of all this until he sees the will for himself in one of the pictures that he took of Acme and Jessica patty caking. Then he's greeted by his unexpected guest. Roger has been hiding out here, and he, like Baby Herman, insists that he did not kill Acme. Instead, Roger wrote his wife a love letter.
Are you kidding me?
The faith that this man, this rabbit, has in his wife is so wholesome and cute. Find someone who believes in you the way Roger believes in Jessica, okay? Roger begs Eddie to help him, but it isn't until Roger handcuffs himself to Eddie during a prank, and the Weasel Patrol is right outside of Eddie's door, that Eddie is forced to hide him. The Weasels search Eddie's apartment, and we find out that toons can die if they laugh themselves to death. That is like, before the dip, that was the only way a toon could die. Eddie goes back to the bar to get some tools to get the handcuffs off, because of course he doesn't have the key.
Hold still, will ya?
Does this help?
Yeah, thanks.
The brilliance of this scene can't be overstated. But you have this guy who can't see his co-star. He's reacting to everything that he does while also doing all of the physical work to make the scene believable. From getting dragged across the room to moving the box as he's sawing at this handcuff. Another fun fact, the lamp that's swinging above them during the scene took so much extra work to implement. Like, it's such a small detail to establish like toons interacting with reality. But like the editing heck alone to get all the shots to match up correctly. Oh, I love this movie. If you're lost on what Eddie thinks is going on, Roger gives a mid-movie summary.
Let me get this straight. You think that my boss, R.K. Maroon, dropped a safe on Marvin Acme's head so that he could get his hands on Toontown?
So Dolores is going to take care of Roger, and Eddie goes home to clean up a little bit. But after his shower, he has an encounter with Jessica Rabbit. Jessica tells Eddie that he was actually set up to take those patty cake pictures, and that Maroon wanted to blackmail Acme. And the only reason she did it was because Maroon threatened to fire Roger. Their dialogue is ridiculous, and I love it.
Anything for my husband, Mr. Valiant. Anything.
What a wife.
I'm desperate, Mr. Valiant. Can't you see how much I need you? Dabbling in watercolor?
Dolores walks in at the wrong time, because of course she does, and we find out that Eddie actually has had this entire thing wrong. Cloverfield, the company that's been buying up the public transport, is the one that's put in the highest bid for Toontown, not Maroon. So unless Acme's will shows up by midnight tonight, Cloverfield is gonna own Toontown, and that just don't make no sense. But there's no time for conspiracies. Roger's too busy making a scene in the bar, which of course attracts the weasels. Eddie throws him inside a speakeasy to hide, but Judge Doom is scary. Judge Doom draws out Roger with something that no tune can resist. The judge is about to give Roger the dip when Eddie convinces the judge that he wants to give Roger just one last drink. And then he uses a little reverse psychology to convince Roger that he wants the drink. And as we know, Roger can't hold his liquor. That gives Eddie the chance to get away with Roger. And fortunately, the Weasel Patrol has actually also already detained a cartoon car, Benny the Cab. So they have their getaway car. They hide out at the movie theater, and Eddie tells Roger a little bit about the tune that killed his brother.
I never did find out who that guy was. All I remember was him standing over me laughing with those burning red eyes.
Dolores shows up and almost has a romantic moment with Eddie, but she's interrupted by both Roger and a newscast. It turns out Maroon has made a real estate deal with Cloverfield. Eddie confronts Maroon directly under the guise that he has the will. Roger plays lookout outside, although that is short-lived. Eddie gets Maroon to talk. Maroon was going to sell his studio to Cloverfield, but Cloverfield wouldn't buy unless Acme also sold them his properties, and Acme refused. So Maroon was going to blackmail him with the pictures of Jessica to get him to sell, and just as Eddie is getting to the most important part of this confession, a gun slides in through the window, and then Maroon is leaking Maroon, if you get what I'm saying.
Shows by midnight tonight. Toontown's gonna be live with a freak. Ah!
When Eddie looks out the window, it's Jessica running off into an alley, so he gives chase all the way to Toontown. In a huge moment for Eddie, he pours out his liquor, gets out his cartoon gun, and gets over his fear of Toontown to drive in and get Roger back.
Let's go.
God, I love this movie. It cracks me up that Disney has used Toontown multiple times since this movie came out. That includes a portion of Disneyland that is currently being reimagined and will be released in the next year or two, in 2023. I assume that they won it in the divorce / had it in their contract in order for this movie to use its characters. But the most notable version, and the one that I hold in my heart, is Toontown Online. A game that came out in 2003 and shut down in 2013, but it had such a dedicated fan base that the fans themselves rebooted that game and continue to host, update, and create new content for this game for free to this day. And all of that is based on this movie. I love this movie. Anyway, there's more tomfoolery, including, Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse sharing the screen for the first and only time ever. Eventually, Eddie catches up with Jessica, who ends up saving his life from an unknown assassin, who reveals his identity as he's running down the alley. It's Judge Doom! Jessica tells Eddie how apparently Doom wants Toontown for some reason, and how Acme actually gave Jessica the will for safekeeping, but she lost it, so...
So he gave you the will for safekeeping?
That's what he told me, except when I opened the envelope, there was only a blank piece of paper inside.
A joke until the end.
But Doom set a trap for them, and they end up crashing. Doom takes them to the Acme factory where they're both searched for the will. The weasels inside the factory are tearing down the wall to Toontown. And Judge Doom reveals that he's the only investor in Cloverfield. Dun dun dun, it's a sole proprietorship. And then he reveals his big master plan. He's gonna destroy Toontown with a modified version of the public transport that is essentially a fire truck that sprays dip. That will literally wipe Toontown off of the face of the earth. And why? Build a freeway. He bought up public transportation so he could destroy it. and is ushering in this age of the highway and is expanding capitalism, so... Woo. Roger comes in, guns a-blazing to save his lady.
Okay, nobody move.
But he's immediately captured. And things are not looking good. Roger and Jessica are hoisted up onto this crane about to be shot with dip. Toontown is about to belong to Judge Doom, and all Eddie can do is sit and watch until one of these gangster weasels shoots him. Or maybe not. He has an idea. He puts on a physical comedy gag performance that knocks the weasels dead. Literally. So he gets rid of them and manages to divert the dip machine for now. But then Judge Doom rolls up for a boss battle. They fight, and then Eddie gets Judge Doom into a position where he gets run over by a steamroller. But then he keeps moving. Oh yeah, this belongs on the list. So yeah, Judge Doom is a toon. We've unlocked the next stage of this boss battle. It is really not looking good for Eddie.
Remember me, Eddie? When I killed your brother, I talked. Just
Christopher Lloyd, the director, the animators, everything that came together to make this character so terrifying. Oh my god, I love this movie. It looks like the end. But then Eddie has some quick thinking to a prop that was introduced earlier in this movie, and Judge Doom succumbs to his own dip. Eddie washes away the dip. Roger, Jessica, and Toontown as a whole are saved, and Benny ends up showing up with the police. It's then that a stain appears on Eddie's shirt. The same stain from ink that Marvin Acme gave him in a gag when he was at the club with him. Turns out it's disappearing and reappearing ink. And it's then that Eddie understands what exactly has happened. So he gives Roger the love letter that he wrote for Jessica, and as Roger is reading it, the ink reappears. Surprise! They've had Acme's will this entire time! Toontown is saved! Subscribe to my channel! Oh my god, no! I have confetti stuck on my ceiling fan, no! That was the one and only too. Oh god, it's such a mess, it's everywhere. Eddie's got a sense of humor back, and as they walk into a cartoon sunset, Jessica and Roger and Eddie and Dolores are all gonna live happily ever after. The end. Who Framed Roger Rabbit has aged shockingly well. Like, you wouldn't imagine that this movie is almost 40 years old. It plays with innuendo and subverts the expectations of noir fiction to deliver a masterpiece. Plot-wise, something that I really enjoy is just how, like, evil and capitalistic, but above all else, like, boring Judge Doom's plan is. Like, this man has created a single shareholder corporation in order to buy up all the public transportation and then buy up Toontown and destroy it and, you know, exterminate all of its residents there within, all with the ultimate aim of paving a highway. Like, it's so, like, banal and it's so realistic, unfortunately. Like, modern evil is not like the evil that's gonna take over the world and destroy the world. No, like, modern evil is boring, it's banal, and it's like destructive in a way that does not value life at all. Like, I think if there's any good representation of what evil looks like, Like, if there's ever been a movie that has gotten realistic evil, like the kind of evil that you yourself are most likely going to face inside the world, it is honestly probably in this movie. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was also the most expensive movie produced in the 80s, with a budget of $70 million, which, if we adjust for inflation, according to Google, amounts to $250 million to be able to produce it today. It was an expensive labor of love. Every frame of this movie that had a mixture of animation and live action had to be individually printed out. An animator would then draw the particular illustration for that frame on tracing paper that was set on top of the photo. The outline drawing then had to be hand colored. Once that was done, the finished drawing would then have to be composited back into the original frame using an optical printer. Let's pretend for a second that there's only 20 minutes of this live action animated mix that's on screen for this hour and 45-minute movie. Every frame of those 20 seconds would have to be printed out, drawn on, and then composited back into the movie individually. And there are 24 frames per second of a standard movie. So like 24 times 60 times 20, what does that add up to? What do I look like, a scientist? Sheesh, that's a lot. I definitely have a bias towards movies that put a lot of thought and effort into both the concept and the practical effects that they manage to pull off. But it's not just bias when I tell you that this movie is fun. This movie is pretty darn good. And if you haven't seen it already, you should definitely treat yourself. The acting is convincing and heartfelt, and honestly, you forget that half of the principal cast are imaginary. Fun fact, Harrison Ford, Chevy Chase, and Eddie Murphy all turned down the role of Eddie Valiant before Bob Hoskins was eventually offered the role. The same could also be said about the role of Judge Doom. Like Christopher Lee, aka Saruman from the Lord of the Rings series, turned down the role. Tim Curry, aka the original clown from It, aka Nigel Thornberry's voice, auditioned for the role, but was turned down by producers because he was, quote, too terrifying. Technically, this movie is rated as PG, but parents should be aware that there's a lot of bad language and innuendo. Christopher Lloyd is terrifying as Judge Doom, and Jessica Rabbit is sexy, which makes people very uncomfortable. But the general consensus seems to be that ages 10 and up will enjoy this. So, if you have a child in your life and you want to be the cool adult, show them this movie. I mean, heck, I loved this movie as a kid, and I turned out all right. Right? If you enjoy this movie and want to have like more of the experience, get this. It's based off a book. It's written by Gary K. Wolfe, and it's called Who Censored Roger Rabbit? And there are some differences. It takes place in the 80s. Toons mostly communicate through speech bubbles that appear over their head. Oh, and Toons can actually make temporary copies of themselves, and it was actually Roger Rabbit, the original one, who got murdered. So Eddie Valiant has to team up with a copy of him before it disappears forever and solve the murder before then. You know, like little differences. If you've seen this movie, what was your favorite scene or joke? If you haven't seen this movie, did I convince you to watch it? What should I cover next? I got a lot of really cool suggestions from the last video, so I'd really like to know your answers below, because you know, teamwork. My name is Kyrie, this is Flights of Fantasy, and until next time, live well and fight the cogs. And don't get dipped.
Coming soon on video and DVD.
In my rocket tube.